Welcome to The Virtual Shift, a show looking at the seismic changes happening in healthcare with virtual care at the epicenter. Join me and my guests as we look at key cultural and policy shifts impacting how providers, payers, and patients connect, as well as how care is being reimagined both for today and the future. Hello, and thanks for tuning in today. I'm your host, Tom Foley. You can learn more about this show by visiting the program on healthcarenowradio.com, and be sure to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter at FoleyTom, and the hashtag The Virtual Shift. And we have a great guest on today that is going to be very informative relative to the adoption of virtual care services. Evan Harmon, he is the Director of Remote Patient Services at RHIA. He also has a second hat of an independent consultant. So he shows what he advises. So Evan, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat a little bit today. Just a little bit about me. So by background, I'm healthcare administration oriented. That was what my education and training was in. But after joining the healthcare field and really starting out in that administrative area, I really found a lot of passion in healthcare IT. The EHR solution we were using at the time, I really wasn't happy with how it was working, and I wanted to join the IT team and start working on the EHR solution that we had at the organization I was with. I started out at Baptist Health, kind of my original first home, and learned a lot at that organization. And when I jumped over to the IT team, we decided we were going to implement Epic, and that was really my first real taste of following a project all the way through, being a part of a really large change management effort. And as I took on the role on the implementation team for Epic, I really enjoyed trying to solve some of the really challenging problems that we were working on and towards. And as I continued my journey, stepped into leadership in the IT space and eventually stumbled into this digital health innovation space and was very fortunate to help start and run some of our remote patient monitoring programs at Baptist, mostly in the chronic disease management space. And it was really exciting to be on that ground floor of that innovation, rolling those programs out, seeing the different types of outcomes, and partnering with multiple RPM and RTM vendor partners to support the initiatives that we were carrying out at Baptist. So really exciting stuff there. And my passion for RPM, remote patient monitoring, digitally enabled tools to change how we were delivering care really increased at that point. And I said, I think I want to start a consulting business and really broaden my horizons and learn a little bit more about the different types of remote monitoring that can be completed on patients. And so ended up getting a client, Resolve Pain Solutions, as one of my clients that I was working with. And that eventually turned into the role that I'm in today with Resolve as Director of Remote Patient Services. So Resolve is an interesting organization. We acquire pain management practices, and we're really there to take the friction out of running those practices. So taking care of delivering the EHR solution, starting remote patient monitoring programs to help them take better care of their patient, really doing all of those types of practice management functions that are really hard for practices to do on their own. They don't have that specialized knowledge. So very fortunate to be partnered up with them and working for them now. And we've got an exciting future ahead. And I think virtual care is really an exciting space to be in with all the digital enabled technologies that exist today.
Awesome. So, the field is very, very crowded in the context of a number of remote patient monitoring, chronic care management, this, that, and the other virtual services componentry, and so hence there's a lot of noise. And
that's right.
These independent practices are finding it very difficult to decide or even understand who to engage relative to these services.
That's right.
Give us your thoughts on the noise and how you approach deciphering it and bringing out that true differentiated value in the vendors that you recommend to your client base.
Yeah, great question. And I definitely agree with you. It is a crowded and noisy market. It's getting really saturated with a lot of products that are out there. So it can definitely be very confusing, as you indicated, for ambulatory groups or for even hospitals and health systems when they're saying, hey, what solution do we want to use? What's out there? So, I always recommend that clients think about first and foremost what problem they're trying to solve. Because the vendor market is busy and there's a lot of opportunities out there, you need to find and align an organization or a vendor with what a vendor partner with what problem you're trying to solve. So people will sometimes ask me, "Hey, Evan, what's the best remote patient monitoring solution out there that's doing physiologic monitoring, or what's the best therapeutic monitoring for this particular use case?" And I don't want to give a politically correct answer. I mean, I will sometimes tell them, I'll say, "Well, what problem are you trying to solve? And let's think about a vendor that can help you with that," as opposed to saying, "This is the best one." The best one may not be the right one for what you're doing. And so you really have to be intentional with what problem you're trying to solve and what strategy you're looking to carry out. So maybe it is that you're starting your journey with just physiologic monitoring, and you're maybe doing a chronic care use case where you're doing hypertension or heart failure. Maybe you have a cardiology focus, but you want to start there, and then you want to feed that in and do some CCM later. So have the data from the remote patient monitoring devices to help you then be able to offer more robust program offerings like a chronic care management. So I really think you have to say, what goal are you trying to achieve? Maybe you also want to do some telehealth with that. So does the platform that you're looking at offer those types of services? So I say to people that are, what's the best solution? Well, what use case is it? And then let's figure out what the best solution is. And, you do have to do your due diligence. I think there's a myriad of products out there that are in different development stages. You want to make sure you're partnering with someone that has the services that you need, and ultimately that they have some experience in that's going to be valuable. I do think that there are opportunities too with new startup companies, where if you get on the ground floor of those startup companies, you can do some really unique work with them. But you got to determine what you're willing and able to do, and find the right partner to help you do that.
Yeah, it's so critical when you talk about a client or a provider practice that wants to start with remote patient monitoring, let's say, but they have plans and desires to scale into chronic care management, right?
That's
So
right.
just don't focus on your short term. Focus
That's
on
right.
your long term, making sure that, to your point, this platform that you're going to choose supports all of the above and
That's
can
right.
allow you to scale. And quite frankly, the pricing model allows you
Mm,
to scale, right?
that's right.
So it's really a very critical point, because we often see clients that have selected A and they didn't think about the long term, and they needed B and
That's right.
C, and so
That's right.
now they have to flip, if you will, in looking at different platforms,
That's
right?
exactly right. And I've worked with health systems before, and you got executives that see the shiny new thing and they're like, "Hey, we want
Yeah,
this thing." And I'm like, "That's great, but have we talked about what our patients are needing within our markets, and really thinking about that?" And I think it's an interesting way to think about innovation. Some people will say, well, we want to do this because we want to remain competitive, or we want to do this because our patients need this, and that's good. I do think that a lot of clients too that I've worked with, some are maybe hesitant to do innovation, or they don't have the budget for it. And so I tell those types of clients, at least pick one thing that you want to focus on, one or two things. You don't have to do all the innovation technologies that your competitors are doing, or you don't have to go get the latest and greatest shiny thing, but focus on your why, what you want to do, what you're trying to accomplish with the patient population that you're looking to serve, and start your innovation journey, whether it's small, whether it's big, but just get started on it, because you'll be really far behind if you fail to do so. And I've been blessed to work with, both Baptist, Resolve, who are thinking about those perspectives, and, dipping their toe in the innovation waters and having a focus, setting up a roadmap that makes sense, and then executing on it, and being really diligent about it, and
yeah.
having the discipline to work through it, because these are not small initiatives. Doing an RPM program is not some small thing. You just say, "Oh, I want to do RPM tomorrow. Let's spin a program up." It's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah, and so it's a crawl, walk, run
That's
scenario,
right.
right? You
That's
definitely
right.
have to be, to your point, diligent. And the other thing I would say, add to your comment, is don't chase the vendor's carrot. You have to have the vendor chase your carrot,
That's
right?
exactly right.
This is all about you the practice, not about the vendor and their marketing pitch about, quote unquote, making money. And I'll give you an example. I was at a conference not long ago, and the RPM vendor was promoting 70% compliance for remote patient monitoring. And I talked to them about their billing model, but they were still charging the provider for devices and things of that nature. So, 30% gap in a lack of compliance is huge when you look at other vendors that are 95% compliant, right?
That's right.
So so that's I look at remote patient monitoring and say the greater and even chronic care management, and say the greater the patient engagement, the greater the behavioral change you'll see in your patients, right?
That's right.
So having a 25% gap in compliance between 70 and 95 is one, a lack in your patient's ability to move towards a greater state of wellness, but it's also a financial drain because you're paying for something that you're not getting any revenue for. And that's what these providers are concerned about as well, is that it's a matter of, I don't want to lose money on it. Right. I want to do it, but I don't want, I'm not a charity and I don't want to lose money on it. So I need to have a vendor that's going to ultimately help me improve my clinical outcomes as well as my financial outcomes.
That's right.
So therefore, it's not just about what you want to do, right? I want to extend care into the home using virtual services, but how can you help me be successful in that? Show me the way, right?
That's right.
Don't dangle a carrot and then not deliver, right? KPI, setting up KPIs with your vendor is important. Your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You need to set those expectations on the front end. What are the goals? What are the end goals that you're looking to achieve? And I think adoption is always key. You're exactly right. You don't want to use a product or roll out a product that people aren't going to use, and you need your vendor partner to help you get there. So that may mean iterating the solution or making changes to it to make it where the patient would want to use it. I've seen organizations use Bluetooth enabled devices that link to apps. That can be sometimes challenging with patient populations who maybe don't want to use an app or don't want to open an app. So then you may need to go and look at your patient population and say, we need cellular enabled apps in those devices in those instances, because we're not going to be able to get our patients to open an app, turn a device on. So you really got to think about that. You got to set those KPIs, and you got to make sure that you're aligned, and talk about that adoption with the vendor and ask for client references and say, hey, how is the adoption within this, and how has the vendor partner helped you get to goal on that? And there's a lot of different strategies that you can implement to help you be successful in those adoption and engagement metrics to get where you want to be. But you got to make sure that the vendor partner's aligned on that and is helping you get to goal just as much as you're going to help yourself get to goal. And I always say this, and I think it's really a true thing. You can have the best technology in the world, but it goes back to also an organization, whether it's a small ambulatory practice or an ambulatory network or a large health system. If you're going to do one of these types of technologies, you really have to align your people. It's a massive change management effort, and you need to make sure that people are bought in all the way from the MA or the RN that's talking to the patient about this program to the physician that's, speaking with their patient about it, trying to convince their patient that this is part of their care plan and that this is how we are going to deliver care to you. So we need you to engage with our product. And then all the way down to the patient, making sure the patient understands why this is important and what outcomes they're expecting to see in all of this as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Setting expectations across the board, even with the patients, and this will let's transition some of the conversation here into some of the challenges that you face. The number one challenge that I know of is that expectation of the patient. Oh, there's a copay here. There wasn't a copay during the public health emergency, but it is now. Right.
That's right.
So setting that expectation that there's whether you have Medicare or Medicare Advantage depends on the plan, but nonetheless there is the potential for copay. So you got to set that expectations. Your thoughts on that?
So yeah, as it relates to those copays and items that have changed since the public health emergency officially ended, setting those expectations with the patient that there is going to be a copay. So you really need to understand the payer landscape a little bit as you're doing this. And I know when you maybe start this out and you start billing, you're going to have to really think about those things. I think as it relates to Medicare patients, there's a 20% coinsurance, and most organizations will, once a claim's adjudicated, actually bill out for that. But setting that expectation on the front end to the patient, hey, you may have a copay. And then as you get into commercial payers, it's payer plan specific. So you really have to understand what your payers are doing and understand the different payer groups that you might be using or associated with to determine what that is. And so you may not always have all the answers for your patients, but I definitely think being very transparent and saying, this is what it could be. Expect to know that you might get a bill for these particular services. And then, there are still payers out there, especially in the RTM space. I see this that are not paying for these services. And in those instances, you need to make an organizational decision. I think when we're providing equitable care and we're providing these types of solutions, do we still want to provide this solution to our patient and maybe not, we're not going to bill for it because we know we're not going to get paid, but maybe it is that we, for example, with RTM, with one of the things that we're working on with Resolve, we're talked about maybe not actually sending the patient 16 prompts or enough, not sending them daily prompts, sending them less prompts, but still getting data from them so they don't hit those billing cycles. So that's something that I think you have to think about too, is like, okay, so if my patient can't afford this, maybe they can't afford it, or the payer is unwilling to pay, how do we still try to engage with these technologies? I do agree, some people are kind of like, well, I can't offer this for free. I mean, everybody can't have this for free. And I think that there's different value adds that RPM brings to the table that aren't necessarily just in the code drops. There's soft dollar savings in readmission avoidance for some patients that are in the chronic disease space. Maybe by doing remote therapeutic monitoring, you're bringing your patient back into your practice sooner because you're engaging with them so you can see. So there's the hard dollars that you're getting in the CPT code drops, and then there's soft dollar savings that you're getting through other avenues. But I definitely would agree that being transparent with your patients about what they might have to pay is really, really key. That way, nobody's getting a surprise bill and nobody is disappointed when it comes to that perspective.
Yeah, so let's go to some other challenges. When you talk about remote patient monitoring or remote therapeutic monitoring, these code sets are broken up into two categories. So be careful about not lumping them all into one. So both of those categories require a device. And so how does that device get paid for? Can you break up those code sets relative to an E&M code versus a practice expense code?
Yeah, so you have 99494, or I'm sorry, 99454, and you've got
that's for remote patient monitoring, correct?
That's correct. And then for the remote therapeutic monitoring, you've got 98975. And so that is, supplying a device. And in the case of remote physiologic monitoring, you're actually supplying a physical device, a blood pressure cuff, a scale. And those do need to be FDA cleared and that kind of thing as a device. And when you look to your RTM code set, which is the corresponding code to that, 98975, very similar. You're supplying a device, and in that case, most of the time it's software as a service. And there have been some, first of all, interpretations about what classifies a device in the RTM world. So there's been a lot of debate about SAMD. Is SAMD required? I'm going to go ahead and put the caveat out there. I'm not an attorney, so you should definitely consult your legal counsel on this.
SAMD, can you just spell that out for the audience?
So software as a medical device. So
gotcha.
There's different FDA classifications for what qualifies as a device, and there's different qualifications that you must meet, and there's different risk levels with those too. So there's a myriad of complexities as you think about what software as a medical device is. But there's been debate out there: is SAMD required? Is it not required? And where I've landed with folks that I've worked with is that it's actually not required. Now, it's one of those things that, do you want to go with somebody who's went through the 513G clearance? That's the paperwork you need to file with the FDA to determine if you do have SAMD. That's a personal choice for the software vendor. But at minimum, you should be working to make sure that you follow the classifications, that you follow those standards of what an SAMD is, what SAMD is based on the FDA's requirements. So you want to make sure that whatever company you're using, they're not just sending out a questionnaire, that it's more robust than that. And it follows some of those table stakes within FDA, classification, but it doesn't have to necessarily go through and be deemed SAMD, but it should be meeting those standards. And you should likely have an attorney or somebody that you're working with kind of do a write-up memo for you and say, yes, it meets based on this, it meets based on this. And if you are more conservative and you want to go with a vendor that has went through that process, that'll be a decision-making point. But SAMD is another thing that's debated. And is this truly a device? Is this not a device? And that kind of falls down under not only 99454, but really 98976 and 77 for the 16-day codes, and then 99454 as well. So
yes, so the added part there of concern is that you have this device. Mm-hmm. And you're getting reimbursed, and these codes that we're rattling off here are categorized as practice expense codes.
Yes.
Not an E&M code. The point there being is if you have a vendor that says, hey, I'll provide the device, I'm just going to roll it into everything else. So if you don't have an itemized list of what you're paying for, you can't validate your practice expense for purchasing the medical device. And if you can't validate your practice expense, you can't bill for that code.
That's right.
That's the key, right?
That's right. Yeah. So you definitely need to take that into consideration as well. Number one, are your devices FDA cleared, or are you gonna be cleared as software as a medical device? And then number two, are you supplying the device? Are you leasing the device? And does that fall within the practice expense codes, or as you indicated, the E&M side?
Yeah, and the other, so the next challenge is, practices say, hey, I want to do RPM, CCM, and RTM all together. I have different needs for different things. So, and you could practice at the practice level, you could offer all three, but at a patient level, it gets a little dicey. You got to know the pairings, right? So can you educate the audience on the proper pairing of these modalities?
Absolutely. So definitely would agree with you there. I think one of the biggest clarifications that you need to know, first of all, if you're doing RPM, RTM, and you're doing CCM, those are actually great programs. And when it comes to RPM and CPM, or RTM and CCM, which is the chronic care management codes, when you're doing those codes, doing those together is actually really a good thing. That provides a true wraparound service for that patient. So you're taking the device data that you're getting in, the feedback from the patient, and you're able to drive your chronic care management plan, and ultimately drop those codes. So I'll start off by saying that they can complement one another. One of the biggest things that you have to check in with your patient on is, number one, are they already enrolled in a CCM program? Maybe they're coming to your practice, but maybe they're going to another type of specialty practice that's offering remote patient monitoring and CCM, or both. And you can't, multiple practices they cannot be doing these together and both dropping those codes. It's that patient can only be enrolled in one CCM program. They can only be enrolled in one remote patient monitoring program or one therapeutic monitoring program. So that's another thing that you need to think about. If the patient does have a need for physiologic monitoring, but also could equally benefit from therapeutic monitoring. So let's take an example of a patient who has heart failure, and maybe they're going to a heart failure clinic and they are getting monitored with RPM, physiologic monitoring. And they also go to a pain management practice and they're getting monitoring with remote therapeutic monitoring, getting feedback on their pain score daily, maybe some PT that they're doing, that kind of a thing. Those programs that patient cannot be billed for both of those. So one of those groups is going to have to choose to capture the revenue. So you almost need to be checking with that patient, hey, are you already enrolled in these programs? I'm not saying that you still shouldn't roll the program out if that patient has a clinical need for it. Great, but just know that only one is going to be paid out for based on that monthly basis. The same goes for CCM. So we can't bill two CCM programs at the same time. And then when it comes to doing both RPM and CCM, you can't share the time. So there's 20 minutes that you need to accumulate per month. That's code 99457 for remote physiologic monitoring. You can't share the time for that with the CCM codes. And the CCM codes, they're varying based on the time you spend. You can spend 30 minutes for complex chronic care. You can spend up to 60 minutes. So in those particular, and then there's add-on codes for that. So you can't use the therapeutic monitoring or the physiologic monitoring time that you're talking with your patient or interacting with your patient for CCM. And likewise, you can't use the CCM time for that. You need to be very distinct in how you time those things out.
Yeah, we're running out of time, but the last item that we're not going to have time to cover, and I'll just cover it quickly, is that onboarding. How do you onboard patients? You can't say to your remote patient monitoring or chronic care management vendor, "Hey, mind my EHR database, find all the customers that patients that qualify, and you will onboard them." Right? From a CCM perspective, you actually have to show notes in your EHR that you had the doctor had a conversation with the patient about the onboarding process. So you got to be there's nuances in the regulatory perspective that could harm you. With that all said, close us out. We have 30 seconds. Close us out. How can people reach you?
Yeah, so people can reach me mainly through LinkedIn. So check me out on LinkedIn. Just search me, give me a search, Evan Harmon on there, and you can reach out to me that way. I'm always happy to come do speaking engagements and do a chat with you on remote patient monitoring. It's a real passion of mine. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can get the conversation going.
Awesome. Evan, great conversation. I hope you come back and we can dig a little deeper. Never enough time to talk about these specific topics and help guide the audience who might be adopting a virtual care program on the nuances of what to look for and how can they be most successful. So with that, I'm going to thank you for joining the program and hopefully you'll come back soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's today's shift. I appreciate the audience taking the time to tune in. If you missed part of today's episode, you can tune back in at the healthcarenowradio.com at the same time, 11 a.m. or 7 p.m. Eastern throughout the week. And be sure to check out the program page at thevirtualshift.co. As well, remember to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter at FoleyTom, and follow the show's hashtag, TheVirtualShift. I'm Tom Foley. Until the next shift.